CNN and the mainstream media are trustworthy, and it's not like they're the worst culprits for monetized data capture. Oh, there are 4.8 million of us, and we grow by the day, both in spirit and in number. As the awakening surges forward, you feel it in your heart. You know that the doubt can be overcome. You know that in spite of the duplicity and lies, that we continue to grow in strength and power. It goes on. Who can you trust? Who can't we trust? Did you know that CNN and the mainstream media are among the worst culprits for the monetization of data capture? That might not mean much to you now, but I'm going to tell you all about it so you understand it. This is by Li Fang in The Intercept. News outlets entrusted with promoting transparency and privacy are also lobbying behind closed doors against proposals to regulate the mass collection of Americans' data. Misinformation over there! Monetize the data! In a filing last week, the Interacting Advertising Bureau, a trade group, reported it was lobbying against a push at the Federal Trade Commission to restrict the collection and sale of personal data for the purpose of delivering advertisements. Delivering advertisements. What does the mainstream media do? They deliver advertisements. The IAB represents both data brokers and online media outlets that depend on digital advertising, such as CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC, Time, US News and World Report, the Washington Post, Vox, the Orlando Sentinel, Fox News, and dozens of other media companies. Oh my God, they're all in one big bunch. They're all together in a big bundle. It don't matter whether you think they're left or right. Their interests are all represented by a single agency when it comes to the important matter of making money. And if you don't know that the most important matter is making money, then I don't know what channel you've been watching. The lobbying reveals a tension that is rarely a centre of the discourse around online privacy. Major media corporations increasingly rely on a vast ecosystem of privacy violations, even as the public relies upon them to report it. There have been some incredible privacy violations. How do you know about it so quickly? Well, because I'm doing them. Major news outlets have remained mostly silent on the FTC's current push. Do you know what a thing that we've learned recently? That we're able to do all these stories because the mainstream media will never do them because they never can. They can never talk about the relationship between government, the military-industrial complex, big pharma, government, they can't because they're part of it. So they're sidetracked. So what they have to do instead is go, misinformation. They have to criticize the individuals involved. They have to throw mud and attack and distract and create culture war, farragos and conflagrations because the truth ain't their ally. They can never just go, here's the facts, here's what's going on, we're nicking your data. Here's the facts, here's what's going on, we're getting on pundits that are pro-war and they make money from war. They're the participants. They're not a bystander. They're not a conduit. They are participants in the web, in the network. This is not conspiracy. We show you all the data. We show our working up. We show our sources. They certainly report on aspects of this problem, but they're not reporting on how they're complicit in the surveillance advertising story, said Jeff Chester, the executive director of the Centre for Digital Democracy, which supports the FTC petition for regulation. Chester noted that major media outlets will cover episodic scandals such as the use of Facebook data by the firm Cambridge Analytica during the 2016 presidential election or algorithmic targeting of ads in politics, but don't provide context of how the outlets themselves use and benefit from the same collection of data for routine advertising purposes. Routine! That means they do it all the time. They're in a sort of a rhythm. You've just got to unplug your head from that stuff, haven't you? You've just got to unplug your head from it. And if you know anyone that's watching, I feel like this is a public announcement. If you know someone that still watches mainstream media, you need to help them. There's a helpline below that can help them switch in and get involved with the truth. Unplug your head, relax. There's that thing in the back of your neck for the Matrix. They're putting it, get that fucking thing out the back of my head. The large media companies have their own pragmatic advertising operations, or what you might call surveillance advertising, using content on their own websites, said Chester. Not only are they not reporting on this issue and what's at stake, but they don't report on what they do. It's not just a privacy issue, it's a democracy issue. It's a consumer protection issue. I suppose it's a democracy issue because they're relaying information. I suppose it's a privacy issue, obviously, because, it's your privacy. And it's a consumer protection issue because as a consumer, which is sadly what we are, not awakening souls on a highway to limitless love, a consumer. That's how they see you. The tension was highlighted in a 2019 New York Times guest opinion column provocatively titled, "This article is spying on you." The article noted that a reader visiting a Times news article on, for instance, abortion might encounter tracking technology used by nearly 50 different companies, including Blue Kai, a firm owned by the massive company Oracle, that sells user data for markets to target those with health conditions and medical terms. When there's all this talk of transparency and misinformation, it seems important to me that health stories and health-related stories and medical stories will be reported on, then the information, your information, will be given and sold potentially to pharmaceutical companies. So you could see how there could be a conflict of interest in the way that they report on those subjects. If pharmaceutical companies are your client, how are you going to report on stories that pertain to the interests of pharmaceutical companies, would you imagine? Tell me in the comments below. The column was based on a review of 4,000 US-based news websites and 4,000 non-news sites conducted by Timothy Libet, formerly with Carnegie Mellon University, and Ruben Binns with the University of Oxford. It found that news sites are generally more reliant on third-party tracking technology than non-news sites and had a lower degree of user privacy. While users may turn to the news to learn of the ways in which corporations compromise their privacy, it is news sites where we find the greatest risk to privacy, noted the authors. That's mental, isn't it? Pickpocketing everywhere. Come over here, we'll tell you about the dangers of pickpocketing. Now what they do, these pickpocketers, is they distract you, like that colorful parrot over there is, and meanwhile they pick your pockets. Now it's going on all over the place, and thank us for telling you about that. Good night. Since then, the news site's user tracking has only gotten more extreme. In 2020, a study published by Ghostery, a company that provides tools to block third-party data collection, found that news websites contain the most trackers globally, more than business, banking, entertainment, or adult websites. What are they? The trackers tend to collect a variety of data, including browsing history, location, and phone identifying information. It's such a fundamental hypocrisy at the core of their business model that it ought to be declared explicitly before, after, and during everything they broadcast. They're capturing your data and selling it. What possible claim towards transparency, honesty, openness can you make? It's also not like they're just joining in a bit with a ubiquitous phenomena. Everyone does it. Businesses, banking, even porno sites, they're all doing it. The media is the worst one. They're the least transparent, the most profiteering, the most venal and mercantile, and they're the ones standing out front and centre saying, oh, misinformation, people have got to be transparent, they've got to be honest. Where's the disclaimer? Where's your disclaimer? And it's been highly profitable. The New York Times, for instance, has moved away from traditional print advertising and paper delivery and is increasingly reliant on digital advertising and subscriptions. In its latest quarterly disclosure, the Times revealed that its digital ad revenues increased by 19.2 million over the same period in the previous year. It's really weird as the economics change as a result of technological advances. All these business models have to radically alter, so they're open to different practices, new practices. Things that we think we're using are using us. That's basically it. I mean, you could even make the same argument for this very channel. Of course, there are adverts during this. I mean, it's the water that we all swim in. But I suppose what it does demand of everyone involved is a removal of hubris and absolute transparency. If the New York Times is making money from bundling up data and selling it on to advertisers, how can you expect objectivity and transparency around the role of big tech? How can you expect objectivity and transparency when they report on the relationship between the government and big tech and data harvesting and how that data is mobilized and the fears we all have around the rise of social media and the ongoing hypnosis of perpetual ubiquitous screens? You can't, can you? The increase was driven in part by greater programmatic advertising revenue, a term for the automated ads served by third-party ad brokers. The Times notably is a member of AB, the lobby group that defends the digital advertising industry from regulation. So next time you ask yourself, why aren't the mainstream legacy media thoroughly reporting on lobbying and the problem of lobbying, you now know the answer. They're lobbyists. Last month, as part of the regulatory push on data privacy, the FTC issued a $2 million fine against the advertising tech firm OpenX for illegally collecting and monetizing location data from children on a mass scale. Advertising platforms such as OpenX serve as an exchange with data from thousands of web publishers and tens of thousands of apps, feeding profiles of users into a system that advertising agencies use to place targeted ads that appear across multiple news websites as users browse the web. Many gaming, weather and dating apps, as well as a variety of websites, quietly collect behavioural, demographic, health and location data on users that is sold to advertising tech brokers. Advertising agencies go to data brokers to better target potential consumers. As individuals browse the web, they are greeted by custom advertisements based on profiles of what data brokers believe to be their shopping habits, interests or concerns. When you hear that, don't you realise how important transparent reporting and efficient regulation is around something that powerful, vast, immersive, intrusive? It's vital. You need real serious people regulating that. The amount of scope, scale is limitless. OpenX, which processes nearly 100 billion ad requests per day, is one of the largest third-party platforms, it's not even the biggest one, that serve as a key mechanism of this data exchange. The FTC alleged that OpenX vacuumed up location information on child-focused apps without parental consent and used the data to attract advertisers. There were a few blogs and industry trade outlet stories that covered the settlement, but no pieces in major media outlets that have otherwise intensely covered Silicon Valley and the sprawling privacy issues presented by consumer-facing tech companies. Wow. So that particular issue went, yeah, we probably shouldn't report. I don't think people will be interested in that, do you? How we're corrupt liars and the worst offenders in this particular area of spying. We'll talk about this area of spying. We'll talk about stuff where we can pose and present ourselves as reliable and prestigious and experts and trustworthy, and we don't do misinformation. We've got proper, look at my tie, look at my suit, hear my accent, shut up, give us your information. If major media outlets had covered the story, they would have to acknowledge an awkward reality. The growth of digital advertising has forced nearly every major for-profit news website to utilise the most intrusive forms of mass surveillance, including browsing history and location data, a dynamic highlighted by the OpenX fine. Though advertising is the focus of the data collection industry, the applications of user data are boundless. Law enforcement agencies have tapped the oceans of user data, including for the targeting of protesters and activist groups. Oh my God. Powerful political interests have hired data brokers to better influence voters. The data broker Axiom, another tech firm that partners with many news websites, has provided data to the FBI and discussed programs to sell user data to the Pentagon. Does the free internet mean an internet dominated by surveillance and manipulation? Asked Chester of Centre for Digital Democracy. Yes. What does it mean that the only way to have an independent news media is to have this kind of surveillance system? Those issues have not been covered by the press. Well, if you had any lingering doubt about your relationship with the mainstream legacy media, let that doubt now be removed. Let the scales fall. Understand fully, truly, and for all time that you cannot trust them. On top of everything else, the lying, the manipulation, and the deception, they're stealing your data and selling it to irresponsible third parties more than any other business in the world, and they won't report about it. They'll bang on about transparency, and you don't know where that data will end up. You just heard the list. FBI, potentially Pentagon. It's a baffling concept. The only way that we can begin to unhook ourselves from this matrix is with a rigorous commitment to freedom and consuming good information, awakening yourself spiritually, demanding that we communicate openly and honestly. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one and have a look at this one, my side channel Awakening, where I talk about the spiritual component. Please sign up to my mailing list so I can tell you what I'm doing and so you can come and see me appearing live so we can continue this conversation together, acknowledging our mutual flaws and imperfections, staying true to one another in spite of that fact, and please, wherever you are in the world, stay free.